A mother's heart stopped when her son vanished on his walk home in 1987. 32 years later, his red jacket turned up in a stranger's attic. The sun hung low over Pinewood Valley, casting long amber rays across the neatly manicured green where townsfolk had gathered for reunion weekend. Laughter and the scent of apple pie mingled in the warm afternoon air as neighbors caught up on years of marriages, births, and losses. A wooden sign decorated with painted chrysanthemums welcomed everyone. Welcome home, Pinewood graduates, class of 79, 84, 89, and all. Beneath it, folding tables groaned under platters of deviled eggs, fried chicken, and fresh-baked scones. Children wove through the crowd, trailing cotton candy sugar in their footprints, while elders reminisced about past reunions, recalling high school pranks that had once shaken the small town to its foundation. Amid the jovial chatter, Diane Archer stood behind a table strewn with lemonade pitchers and solo cups. At 54, she carried herself with a gentle reserve, her auburn hair streaked with silver at the temples. Today, her Sunday blue dress was crisp, her homemade quilt draped over a folding chair next to her. The quilt, a patchwork of yellowing fabrics, stood in stark contrast to the vibrant throng of classmates who roamed past. Despite the bustle around her, Diane's gaze gravitated to a wooden memorial board propped up near the bandstand. On it were photographs of local children who had gone missing over the decades, affixed with pushpins, some black and white, some faded Polaroids. Names of boys and girls Diane once had known, now only living in memory. She poured lemonade into a precariously piled stack of cups, smiling politely at incoming guests while her mind drifted elsewhere. A group of Pinewood High classmates approached. Linda Chun, widowed and spry at 60, joked about the old times, nodding toward the memorial board. "Still can't believe how the years fly," Linda said, lowering her voice. "Remember how we used to race down Pine Street on our bikes? Hard to imagine any of that now." Diane forced a small laugh, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Some things feel like they happened yesterday," she murmured, eyes drifting across the photos. She thought of Maple Street 2 blocks over, where her son Ethan had bounded down that autumn day in 1987. 6 years old, head tilted back to watch a soaring hawk, jacket unzipped to reveal the bright yellow hockey puck patch on the sleeve. It was the last she had seen of him. The tall man with graying hair, Marcus Reed, the town's archivist, stepped forward, unfurling a heavy quilt that had been draped over a folding stand. The quilt was a community project. Each patch represented a child lost to time. At the bottom right corner was a vivid red square, embroidered with the name Ethan Archer, age 6, October 12, 1987. Diane's breath caught in her throat as Marcus turned down the quilt to reveal a child's jacket. Mothballs and dust still clung to it, its cotton fabric threadbare in places, yet unmistakable. It was a 1986 Sears brand windbreaker, its crimson hue dulled by decades but unmissable. On its left sleeve was the faded hockey puck patch, a small circle of gold in a sea of red. The crowd murmured. Some clapped politely, assuming it was simply a relic woven into the quilt. But Diane's heart pounded so violently she felt certain others could hear it. Her hand flew to her throat. The air seemed to pinch around her lungs. She had not touched that jacket in 32 years, yet here it was, dangling from Marcus's meaty fingers, as though summoned from slumber in a stranger's attic. For a split second, Diane wondered if she imagined it. Yet every fiber of her being knew this jacket belonged to Ethan. "Marcus," she said, voice trembling. "Whose jacket is that?" Marcus, a middle-aged archivist with horn-rimmed glasses, glanced up at her, confusion flickering in his eyes. "It was donated by Clara Fields, our friend who runs the old antique shop," he replied, extending the jacket to Diane. "She found it in an attic on Elmwood Road, and since it bore your son's name, she asked me to sew it into the quilt. She didn't know exactly whose it was. She just wanted us to have it as part of the Missing Children Memorial." Diane closed her eyes, blinking back tears as images of that long-ago October afternoon swirled in her mind. The last time she saw Ethan, racing past her front porch, the red jacket fluttering behind him. She remembered how she had called out his name, ever so casually, as if she expected him to pause, wave, and jog into the house. Instead, she watched him vanish around the corner of Maple Street. No one had ever found him. Now, 32 years later, here lay the jacket in her trembling hands. She forced herself to keep her composure, setting down the half-filled cup of lemonade with a soft plink. "Thank you," she said quietly. Marcus frowned, unsure of how to respond, and pushed the quilt aside. Nearby, a group of local parents watched Diane's distress with concern. "Mrs. Archer," called out a voice. Diane forced a hollow smile and waved them away. They mistook her agitation for nostalgia. Nodding politely, she retreated toward the shade of an oak tree, clutching the jacket to her chest. The edge of the quilt scraped the ground behind her, reminding her how close she had come to dismissing it as someone else's memory. Now that red jacket burned like a brand against her heart. Diane's small house on Pine Street sat 2 blocks from Maple Street, where the last echoes of Ethan's laughter had faded into a silence that settled over her life like a persistent fog. The living room walls were lined with photo albums, each stuffed with tacked-in mementos from 1987. An Albany Gazette clipping headlined "Town Holds Vigil for Missing Boy," dated October 13, 1987, frayed Polaroids of search parties scouring the creek, and a poster distributed to neighboring towns featuring young Ethan's smiling face. A child's drawing, crayon scrawls of gingerbread houses, was taped to the side of the refrigerator, an attempt by Diane's daughter-in-spirit, her niece Laura, to fill the gap left by Ethan's absence. Now at home, Diane folded the red jacket carefully on the kitchen table, its stale odor of mothballs mingling with the sour tang of late summer heat. A shaft of sun pierced through the curtained window, illuminating the hockey puck patch on the sleeve, a tiny circle of gold, its threads unraveled at the edges. Ethan had insisted on wearing that jacket every autumn day. He would zip it halfway up and swing his arms in big motions, declaring that he'd be captain of the backyard. When he vanished, his jacket remained half unzipped in the closet, as if he might dash back in at any moment. Diane's fingers traced the patch, as though they could feel the warmth of Ethan's small body attached to it. She closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, that trembling panic she used to feel every night before bedtime when she tiptoed to his room, worried he might appear on the windowsill. She had clung to hope, flickering, feeble hope, throughout those 32 years. Now it roared back with a sudden force, proof that Ethan had lived past that awful week in 1987. But could she trust it? Too many false alarms, she reminded herself. In 1992, someone claimed to have seen a boy matching Ethan's description near Syracuse, New York. Turned out to be another child. In 2000, a phone caller from Chicago teased her, only to hang up. That cruel hoax cost her a month of sleep, reduced her to a trembling wreck. Now this jacket, such a small, innocuous item, yet it leapt off the quilt as if seeking her out. She shivered, as though the jacket were a gateway to something she didn't know if she could face. An abrupt knock at the door sliced through her reverie. She jumped, clutching the jacket to her chest. Laying it gently on the corner of the table, she straightened her apron and walked to the front door. Leaning against the frame was Old Man Benson, retired after decades as Pinewood Valley's detective, with a rumpled tan coat and a fedora tipped at a rakish angle. His face had aged into a network of lines that spoke of sleepless nights and cold case frustrations. "Diane," he said in that gruff whisper she remembered all too well. The aroma of cigar smoke clung to him. "Mind if I come in?" "Of course," she allowed, stepping aside. Benson ducked his head and entered, nodding to the jacket on the kitchen table. His eyes narrowed. "I heard there was a red jacket given to the memorial." "Didn't know it belonged to Ethan." Diane nodded, smoothing her palms over the quilt-soft fabric of her skirt. It was found in a stranger's attic. Clara Fields donated it to the memorial. I saw it and came straight home. Benson folded his arms as though weighing the significance. You believe it was Ethan's? He asked. His voice lacked rancor, more weary acceptance of a heartbroken mother's impulses. Marcus said the patch matches exactly, Diane whispered, jaw trembling. He said Clara found it in an upstairs room at 48 Elmwood Road, a house owned by someone named Samuel Colton. She swallowed hard. He moved to upstate New York in late 1987, just after Ethan vanished. A flicker of recognition passed over Benson's face. Colton, he was that recluse who lived on the edge of town. Owned a farm in the hills. I remember now. Guy never mixed with the locals. Rumor was he'd inherited wealth from his father, who died in a car crash back in '74. How well do you know him? Diane asked, though her heart hammered in fear. The last memory she had of Colton was a pale, disheveled man, eyes darting like startled birds, looming near the search party one night. Benson had politely escorted him away, muttering under his breath that he'd found something interesting in an abandoned barn. I questioned him briefly back then, Benson said. He claimed he hadn't seen anything, and then he left town suddenly about a month after you reported Ethan missing. I assumed he moved on for good. He paused, eyeing the dusty bulletin board. If that jacket truly belonged to your boy, well, Diane, I reckon this changes everything. Diane felt a breath escape her lips she didn't realize she'd been holding. But along with relief, a tide of dread washed over her. She didn't want to believe, yet she couldn't turn away. She just closed her eyes and stared at the red jacket, memory choking her. That night, Diane lay awake on the old iron bed in her guest room, the red jacket folded neatly on a cedar chest at the foot. The summer breeze stirred tree branches outside her open window, carrying distant crickets' chirp like a lullaby from another time. She listened to the wind, hoping it might carry a word from the past. Instead, her mind replayed snippets of 1987, Ethan bounding through the front door, sweaty-haired and exhilarated because he had spotted two hawks weaving overhead. How she called him in for dinner, how he waved absent-mindedly, promising to wash his hands soon. She recalled the exact moment she realized he never returned. Diane's thoughts drifted to the old photograph she had tucked away in a worn leather binder. Ethan on his 6th birthday, grinning as he clutched a slice of chocolate cake. He wore the same red jacket, unbuttoned. In the background, the same Sears brand windbreaker flare in the wind at the edge of the porch. That photograph was grainy, but she recognized the patch's frayed edges. Somehow, that image had burned itself into her retina. The crooked smile, a dentist's glue residue still on his lower lip. Now, 32 years later, the jacket claimed a presence within her home. She didn't dare touch it again until morning, for fear that such a tactile link might shatter her completely. Dawn arrived with lavender skies and a chorus of birdsong. Downstairs, she found Benson waiting on her front porch, a thermos of coffee in hand. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing her a mug. The steam curled upward, carrying a bittersweet aroma. Diane sipped the coffee, letting its warmth settle in her chest. "I can't believe it," she murmured. Could it really be Ethan's? Benson leaned against the railing, examining the horizon where Maple Street curved out of view. "Let's find out," he said. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a plastic bag containing a credit card-sized photograph. "Found this in my files, a Polaroid taken by your brother at Ethan's birthday party. The same day as the picture you keep. But I noticed something. See that frayed patch on the left sleeve? Looks almost identical to the one on that jacket." Diane took the photo, studying it. There he was, Ethan, 6 years old, blowing out candles. His jacket was open, revealing a faded yellow t-shirt. On the left sleeve of the jacket, a gold hockey puck emblem was peeling at the edge. "It's the same jacket," she whispered, tears stinging as she set the Polaroid aside. He had to have worn it every time he left the house into the cool air. "Exactly," Benson said, voice low. And the photo's date stamp, October 12, 1987, places him wearing that jacket only hours before he disappeared. A heavy silence settled. Diane's mind raced through the years, the fruitless manhunts through the creek bed, the kites she'd flown in hope that Ethan would see her and land them on his lap, the endless nights she lay in bed, willing him to reappear. Now, that jacket was a physical tether to a child she had almost given up as lost forever. "I have contacts at the state crime lab in Albany," Benson continued. "We can run the fabric through fiber analysis. If there's any chance the lab can extract fibers, hair, or other evidence from the jacket, we'll know more. But I suspect the bigger clue won't be scientific. It'll be the story behind Samuel Colton and why he had Ethan's jacket." Diane nodded, steeling herself. "All right, let's start with Elmwood Road." Hours later, Diane and Benson climbed into Diane's old navy blue SUV, one she had kept after her divorce, waiting for Ethan to return so he could drive it one day. Now it carried them toward 48 Elmwood Road, the house where Clara Fields had found the jacket. Elmwood Road meandered gently out of Pinewood Valley, its trees arching overhead like a cathedral. The house at number 48 was a two-story frame structure with sagging siding and unkempt shrubs overtaking its porch. The windows were boarded, and the paint was peeling in long strips. A weathered sign for sale, clipped to a fence post, sagged in the afternoon breeze. Diane's stomach clenched. She remembered the house from childhood, owned then by Harold Colton, Samuel's older brother, who died in a car accident in 1974. As a girl, Diane would peer through the yellowing lace curtains, watching the Colton boys play with a trio of kittens. She remembered how Ethan had begged her to take him there, but Diane always said no, they're just a little spooky, sweetie. Spooky was an understatement, she realized now. A chill formed at the back of her neck as they hopped out of the SUV. Benson carried the red jacket slung over one arm. Diane held the Polaroid in her trembling hand. They paused at the rust-heavy gate, the latch squeaking when Benson lifted it. The yard was overgrown, wildflowers scattering the grass like confetti forgotten after a party. They ascended the warped wooden steps and tugged at the front door. The lock had rusted over. With a gentle shove, they stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of light that pierced a crack in the boarded-up window. The foyer's floorboards were bowed, layers of old newspapers blanketed in dust. In one corner lay a shattered picture frame. The glass lay in shards like ice on an abandoned pool. The red jacket felt heavier in Diane's arms, as though it pulsed with memory. She and Benson exchanged a look, as if taking a long breath before diving into murky waters. Inside the house, the musty odor of decay clung to every surface. Furniture lay toppled, tangled in cobwebs. Wallpaper peeled like dead skin, exposing boards that frown with age. Diane's shoes creaked on the floorboards as she followed Benson into what had once been the living room. There, propped against a collapsed bookshelf, she noticed an old black and white photograph pinned to a length of string, picture wire, rusted and slack. The photograph depicted a young boy and girl, twins, around 6 years old, standing on a wooden porch. Their faces were obscured by damage. A single crease bisected their smiles. But the boy's jacket, once the same Sears brand windbreaker, hung open in the ghostly image. On the porch railing lay a pair of children's sneakers identical to those Ethan had worn that day. Diane's chest tightened. She knelt, gingerly touching the photograph's edge. Who are these children?" she whispered to Benson. He shook his head slowly. "Don't know. But look here." He pointed to the back of the photograph, a faint scrawl in pencil, E&E October 87. Beneath it, a stamp date, Colton Photography, Pinewood, PA. The initials struck Diane like a blow to her ribs. E And Ethan and Emma. Could that girl be her daughter? Yet in 1987, Diane had been told her daughter Emma, born 3 years after Ethan, was safe with Grandma Adeline, who lived out west. She never expected her children to become twins of fate, reunited only to vanish together. She rose, stifling a sob. Each breath felt like rasping through a straw. So Colton Photography took this photo. She pointed at the strap of a half-collapsed camera on a side table, its lens caked with dust. Someone had to bring them here to be photographed. Benson's lips drew tight. That suggests the Coltons weren't merely neighbors. Maybe family acquaintances. I'll check the town archives, Department of Births and Deaths, see if there's a listing for any Colton relatives having twins born in 1981. That might give us a lead on that girl's identity. Diane's gaze drifted to a side door, slightly ajar. "Let's check upstairs," she said. She climbed the creaking stairs, each step complaining in protest. At the top, she noticed a half-open door to what must have once been a child's bedroom. The wallpaper featured a faded pattern of pastel sailboats, peeling at the corners. On the floor, a small wooden train was half buried under debris. She knelt to clear away dust, revealing a crudely hand-drawn sketch. Two children, their arms entwined, standing before a house with Sarah's home scrawled beneath it. Sarah's home. Diane echoed. The name felt foreign yet pressing, as though it had always hovered at the edge of her memory. Footsteps on the stairs made her jump. Benson entered the room, an index card in hand. "Found something in the birth registry," he said. He held out the card. Eliza Colton, a twin, born November 1981. Father, Harold Colton. Mother, Marion Price. He traced a finger over the pencil erasered smudge where another name once stood. But the records have a hole from 1982 to 1984. Seems like someone paid to have those pages expunged. And here's another note. Ethan Archer, October 12, 1987. Last seen Maple Street. They're linked somehow. Diane swallowed. "Ethan vanished on Maple Street wearing this jacket," she said, plucking at the sleeve's frayed edge. But who was Eliza Colton? And why would the registry block her record? Maybe she was adopted or died. Benson rubbed his temples. If Harold and Marion had twins, and one was hidden in Colton Photography this whole time, then maybe the Colton family spirit wanted to protect them. But from what? And why would Samuel Colton leave town with Ethan's jacket? Diane's pulse fluttered. Maybe Samuel thought, maybe he knew about Eliza and Ethan's disappearance, and she closed her eyes to stop the images blossoming in her mind. Colton carrying a toddler-sized body up those same creaking stairs that now groaned beneath her. She swallowed hard, steeling herself. "Let's head back to town. There's someone I want you to meet." The community center housed at the old manufacturing plant on East Alder Street was a bright, airy facade compared to the dilapidated house on Elmwood Road. Large windows lined the front, showcasing local art classes, after-school programs, and a colorful mural commemorating Pinewood's history. Through those windows, Diane saw children painting on easels and elderly ladies knitting in rocking chairs, unaware of the storm gathering outside. Inside the administrative office, Diane and Benson sat across from Evelyn Nolan, a woman in her early 40s with auburn hair pulled back into a neat bun. Evelyn's eyes were a clear green, and her smile was warm. Yet Diane noticed how Evelyn's stare flicked briefly toward the photo Diane carried, the Polaroid of Ethan on his birthday. Evelyn's expression tightened. "Mrs. Archer," Evelyn said, offering a perfunctory handshake. "Thank you for coming. I understand you had some questions about the jacket Clara donated." Diane placed the red jacket and the Polaroid on Evelyn's desk. The bright overhead lights glinted on the yellowed fibers. Evelyn's eyes widened imperceptibly. She swallowed. "Yes. Clara told me she discovered it in an attic, but she didn't mention whose it was." Because you knew, Diane said calmly. You know everything about these old homes, Evelyn. You must have known about the Colton family history. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. I just teach art classes here. My involvement with the Colton family was minimal years ago. I remember Mr. Harold Colton, but that was before I moved back to Pinewood. Ah, your father taught at Pinewood Elementary, Diane interjected. She flipped through a folder of old newspaper clippings from 1987, a photo of Evelyn in a classroom, chalk on her palms. I have a photo of you standing next to Mr. Colton's twin girls, Eliza and someone else. Their names. Evelyn's face paled. She lifted a framed class photo from the desk's corner. 1987, third grade class. At the far right, partially cropped, she and Mrs. Price's daughter, Eliza. But in the back row stood a boy wearing that same red jacket. Oversized for his frame, his eyes a mirror of Diane's own. He didn't smile. His name tag read Ethan Archer. Evelyn's hand shook as she waved at the photograph. I don't know how that happened. I never saw Ethan there before he went missing. That jacket in my class photo, someone must have switched clothing. I swear I didn't realize until later. Diane's throat constricted. She leaned forward. Do you remember Samuel Colton near the school that day? He would have been 6 years older than you. He used to be seen loitering in the parking lot, taking photos of the kids. Evelyn's gaze darted upward, then dropped to the jacket. He was always different. Everyone called him Uncle Sam, though no one was sure why. He gave candies to the kids sometimes. But he never hurt anyone. She shook her head, tears brimming. I moved away in '88 after that whole ordeal. I barely knew him. Where is he now? Benson demanded. Any idea? No, Evelyn whispered, wiping her eyes. Last I heard, he moved to New York. But there were rumors he was institutionalized after a nervous breakdown in the early '90s. I didn't know he ended up in the mental facility near Rochester. Benson stood, picking up the Polaroid and slipping it into his coat pocket. Thank you, Evelyn. That helps. If you remember anything else, anything at all, please let me know. Evelyn nodded, reaching out to gently touch the red jacket. I'm so sorry. I wish I could have protected those kids. She flinched as if spooked, then collected herself. I'll find you if I recall more. Diane exited into the afternoon sun, heart thrumming. As they descended the steps, Benson touched her arm. We've got enough to go on, he said. Book a motel in Rochester. I'll notify my contacts at the state police. If Colton's in a facility, we need to talk to his doctor, get his records, see where he stands. Diane nodded. She peeled her sunglasses down over her eyes. And if we find him, we find Ethan and Emma. The drive to Rochester to New York stretched 3 hours through rolling farmland and sleepy towns. Late summer's haze clung to the horizon as Diane gripped the steering wheel. Beside her, Benson studied an old atlas marked with his scrawled notes. State facilities about an hour north of here, the Pinecrest Psychiatric Hospital, he said, eyes scanning the map. They won't let just anyone in to see a patient. We need probable cause, evidence that Colton committed a crime. But his records are sealed unless we can prove relatedness to Ethan's disappearance. Diane exhaled slowly, anger flickering. We have the jacket, and 2 Polaroids of him wearing it. That should be proof, right? Benson nodded. Partially. But we also need to connect him to Eliza's whereabouts if he was her caretaker. That shows a pattern of kidnapping. If we can establish that he rescued those kids in '87, they'll grant us access to his files. Diane stared out the windshield. Her reflection shivered in the glass, a mother haunted by decades of uncertainty, racing against the clock to reclaim her children. "I'll do whatever it takes." At dusk, they arrived in Rochester. The motel was a tired brick building wedged between a pizza joint and an empty lot. Diane tossed her overnight bag onto the bed, then laid the red jacket on the TV stand, its presence enough to make the room feel too small. She flicked on the TV, half hoping for a local news report on Colton, but static greeted her. She turned it off and sat on the edge of the bed, hugging her knees. Benson rapped on the doorframe. Got confirmation. They moved him out of Pinecrest last month to a maximum security wing at the Highland Hills Institution for Criminally Insane. They say he's more violent now, unstable. Diane's heart jolted. Violent? I thought Mother Teresa was his self-image, that he believed he was saving kids. She shook her head, despondent. What happened to him after 87? Benson rubbed his chin. According to a former detective, he worked as a caretaker for a private home in upstate New York until 91, he said. Then the family reported 2 children missing, no leads. They found him in a locked shed, muttering about protecting the chosen ones. Took 3 months before they could wrestle him loose. That's when he was committed to Pinecrest. Diane's vision blurred. 2 children? So Ethan and Eliza weren't the only ones who? Benson nodded gravely. No. There was a brother and sister there, twins around the same age. Names unknown. Everyone thought they'd beaten a hasty path to Canada. But apparently, the parents paid hush money to avoid scandal. But if Colton confessed to hiding those kids, why let Ethan and Emma go unseen for so long? Diane took a shaky breath. Because he wanted to perfect his plan, to raise them in isolation. Maybe he believed they were his children, destined to be handed down through his twisted legacy. She closed her eyes, picturing Colton, muttering in that shed, clutching Ike's photograph. I can almost see his dirty fingernails pressing that photo against his chest. Benson pointed to the jacket. We have to find that boathouse he mentioned in his diary. If that's where he kept them for decades, we can break in with a warrant. But first, we need his diary. Diane rose, determination resetting her posture. Wait here. She grabbed the jacket, leaving Benson frowning in a motel room. She hopped into her SUV and drove downtown to the Highland Hills Institution. Streetlights flickered on as night fell. Inside the hospital's narrow hallway, a uniformed guard ushered Diane into a small visitor's waiting room. The upholstery was threadbare, the walls painted institutional white. A sign on the wall read, "Visiting hours, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. She swallowed, glancing at her watch, 6:45 p.m. Visiting hours were over. I understand visitation ends at 4, she stammered to the guard. But I have evidence, this jacket, proving I'm his legal next of kin. My children were abducted by Samuel Colton in 1987. I must see him. The guard's expression flickered with confusion. Legally, you need a court order. But let me check with Dr. Meredith Cole. He jingled a walkie-talkie. But I wouldn't hold your breath, ma'am. Diane's chest tightened. She leaned past the guard to peer into the hallway. A lone nurse's station sat in shadow. She steeled herself and strode past the guard's outstretched arm. Dr. Cole, please, I just need 5 minutes. It's a matter of life and death. Footsteps approached. Dr. Meredith Cole emerged, a stern woman in her mid-50s, silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun, black-rimmed glasses sliding down her nose. She peered at Diane through narrowed eyes. You're Diane Archer? Dr. Cole said. I was briefed about you, claiming to be the mother of 2 kidnapped by Samuel Colton. You have evidence. Diane held out the yellow jacket. This belonged to my son, Ethan. I have Polaroids, dated October 12, 1987, showing him wearing it. Colton's diary mentions a boy named Eli who arrived at his boathouse in 1987. That's Ethan. I need to know where he is now. Dr. Cole's eyes darted around the room, as if searching for hidden cameras. This is compelling, she said at last. But the hospital must maintain patient confidentiality. However, I can share that Mr. Colton was transferred to our affiliate Highland Hills Institution. They haven't notified us of any appeals or releases. He remains under maximum security. Diane felt her fingers grow numb around the jacket's hem. So he's alive, she whispered. My son, he's alive. Dr. Cole nodded, gaze softening slightly. Ethan and Emma. If he did take twins, then yes. They should be alive, unless they died in the late 90s. But our records are sealed. You need a subpoena. But I'm willing to support your petition. I'll provide a psychological evaluation. He's delusional, suffering from schizophrenia. I believe if you present yourself as the mother with corroborating evidence, we can expedite your request. Diane's lips trembled. Thank you. She swallowed a sob. I'll call a lawyer first thing in the morning. Dr. Cole gazed at the jacket, pale lines under her eyes. I'll notify you if anything changes. Good luck, Mrs. Archer. Diane nodded, turning to exit. In her mind, the boathouse loomed like a phantom, beckoning. She would find Dee, Emma, Elliot, whatever names they now bore. She would pull back the shutters on the decades they lost. The next morning, Diane and Benson drove toward Greenwood Lake, a 30-minute detour northwest of the institution. The highway ribboned through dense woodland, edges dappled with early fall foliage. Every mile marker tightened Diane's chest, her mind swirling with what she might find. Under her seat, the red jacket remained folded in a plastic evidence bag. She reached down and touched the familiar fabric, cool and stiff. The jacket had become a talisman of hope and dread, a symbolic key to a lock she had nearly forgotten even existed. They exited onto Greenwood Road, a two-lane stretch lined by towering oaks and shady groves. Benson consulted a crumpled sheet of paper, Colton's diary entries scrawled on yellowed pages. One entry read, October 14th, 1987. The children arrived today. I have given them new names, Eli and Esme. The boathouse awaits. I will raise them to be grateful for my protection. Below, in shaky pen, October 20th, 1987. Eli asked to see Mother. I cannot allow it. He must know sacrifice to appreciate salvation. The coordinates scrawled at the bottom pointed here to Greenwood Lake's west shore. As the SUV rolled closer, Diane saw a narrow dirt road veering off through brambles. At its entrance hung a rusted sign, Greenwood Nature Preserve, Keep Out. She parked in a small gravel lot, gravel crunching under tires, and hopped out, Benson close behind. They trudged down the overgrown path, dappled sunlight flickering across ferns. The sound of distant water whispered in the air, waves lapping at logs, leaves rustling overhead. The path ended at a broken chain-link fence tangled with vines. Beyond it lay an abandoned boathouse, roof sagging, paint peeling into slats of bare wood. Its dock jutted over the glassy surface of the lake, creaking in a breeze that made the reflection of clouds tremble like watery ghosts. Voices drifted out of the boathouse, soft murmurs too far to distinguish. Diane's heart thundered. She raised her hand to hush Benson. He nodded, crouching behind a mossy boulder. Together, they circled the boathouse's perimeter, creeping along the tree line. A makeshift curtain, a stained cotton sheet, draped over a window slit. The glint of metal echoed in Diane's eyes, the padlock on the boathouse door, ancient and rusted. She knelt before it, brushing away fallen leaves. Beneath the lock's rust, she saw a streak of white paint, tiny flecks chipped from the jacket sleeves when she first touched them. They're in there, she whispered, breath quivering with relief and terror. "They're alive." Benson placed a hand on her shoulder. "You ready?" Diane exhaled, steeling herself. "Yes." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a spare key, obtained from an old Pinecrest guard who recognized Colton's initials etched into its bit. She slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. One turn, and the padlock snapped open. Inside, the air was cool and damp, heavy with mildew. The boathouse was a single room with aged wood planks for flooring. In one corner, a battered cot sagged under the weight of a rumpled blanket. Two figures lay curled up, silhouetted by a single lantern flickering against the far wall. Diane's breath hitched, a man and a woman, sleeping in the hollow echo of the boathouse. The man's hair was brown, streaked with hints of gray, face lean with unshaven stubble. Yet the jawline, the stretched scar near the left eyebrow, the hazel eyes, everything about his face screamed Ethan Archer, now 37. At his side lay a woman pale as alabaster, her features soft, yet laced with a familiar look, the same hazel eyes, the same curve of her chin. Emma, his twin sister, grown into a young woman of 32. Diane's knees threatened to buckle. Tears rained down her cheeks as she took hesitant steps forward. The lantern's glow painted their faces, and the man shifted, opening his eyes. Cognition dawned in his gaze, childlike confusion, disbelief. "Mother," he whispered. Diane's humming sobs cut across the room. "Yes, yes, Eli." She knelt, arms shaking as she reached out. He jerked back, blinking, disoriented. His gaze flicked to Emma curled beneath the blanket. She stirred, stretching, hair falling across her face. "Something's wrong," Emma muttered, turning onto her side. Her voice cracked with dislocation. "Why are you here?" Diane pressed a trembling finger to her lips, tears staining the lantern's glow. "Please, please believe me. It's me, your mother." She held out the red jacket wrapped inside a plastic bag. "Your jacket, Ethan." "It's mine." "This is it, isn't it? You wore it the day you disappeared." Confusion turned to recognition in Ethan's eyes. He shot upright, blanket falling to the floor. "That jacket." He reached a shaky hand for it, trailing his fingers over the torn patch as if greeting a lost friend. Emma rose too, blinking blearily in the lamplight. "Mama," she whispered. Diane lunged forward, wrapping them both in her arms. The years dissolved, the nightmares, the guilt, the bone-deep agony that had become her life. Ethan melted into her, burying his face in her shoulder. Emma sobbed softly, clutching a locket pressing against her chest, one Diane recognized as belonging to Marion Price, Harold Colton's wife. It contained a small photograph of two toddlers, Eliza and her twin, now revealed as Emma. "I'm here," Diane choked. "I'm here, and I'm never letting you go again." Moments later, the distant wail of sirens grew closer. Diane stepped back, wiping tears with the sleeve of her shirt as Emma and Ethan staggered to sit on a cot. Colton, who had been roused from a dark corner, emerged, thin and gaunt, eyes wild with rage and fear. His face was pale, eyelids trembling, as though he had been summoned from a nightmare. "Leave them," he rasped. "They are mine. Mine to protect." Ethan rose, voice firm despite his shaken veneer. "No, you can't keep us here. We have a mother. She's been looking for us." The coat sleeve brushed against the lantern's glow, illuminating the scar under his left eyebrow. Colton shook his head, stepping forward. "You don't understand. The world is cruel. Your family didn't care for you. I saved you." His voice cracked halfway through, revealing a deep-seated delusion masquerading as twisted benevolence. He moved to grab Emma, but Ethan stepped between them. "Back off," Ethan growled, stronger than Diane had ever known him to be. "I'll call the police if you don't let her see us." A commotion echoed from outside. The loud thump of leather boots, flashlights' beams rattling against the wooden walls. Colton's eyes flicked to the lantern, then to the window. His face convulsed with panic as the siren shrieked near the boathouse. Diane tried to keep her voice gentle. "Samuel, please, you've done enough. Let them go." Colton's shoulders sagged. He crumpled to his knees, head in his hands. Ethan and Emma both took cautious steps toward their mother. Outside, Diana, Ethan's fiancée. No wrong. This was Diane's long-lost son, his fiancée no longer relevant. Instead, the police officers, Detectives Ronald Hicks and Janine Morales, rushed in. They leveled flashlights on Colton, guns lowered. In the lantern's glow, Diane recognized the detective who had first interviewed her in 1987 when Ethan vanished. He was older now, hair salt and pepper, but his eyes still held compassion. She nodded, sobs choking her. She clutched Ethan and Emma in her arms. Emma buried her face in Diane's shoulder, and Ethan's face was a mask of bewilderment and relief. Diane bent down, brushing her finger along Emma's tear-streaked cheek. "My baby," she whispered, pressing her forehead to Emma's. Detective Morales trained her flashlight on Colton, now rocking back and forth on the floor. "Samuel Colton, you're under arrest for kidnapping 2 children in 1987. You have the right to remain silent." Her words trailed off as Colton's entire body shook with grief masked as anger. Ethan knelt beside his sister, pale eyes locked onto his mother's face. "It's been so long," he said softly. "We've been so many places, so many names." Diane pressed a finger to his lips. "I know, darling, but you're home now." In the weeks that followed, Pinewood Valley buzzed with the unbelievable news. Ethan and Emma Archer, twins thought lost to time, had been found alive. News vans lined Maple Street. Reporters clamored for interviews. Diane struggled to navigate the swirl of cameras and microphones outside her home. The red jacket, now sealed in an evidence envelope, remained on her coffee table, its presence both comforting and unbearable. Inside the living room, Ethan and Emma sat on opposite ends of the couch. The once familiar set seemed surreal, like stepping onto a stage for a play they could not remember auditioning for. Emma cradled a locket in her hand, Harold Colton's family heirloom, its chain wrapped around her finger. Ethan stared at a Polaroid of his 6th birthday, now slightly warped at the edges from moisture they couldn't control. Both siblings grappled with the enormity of their new reality, a family they never knew, a world that had evolved without them. Diane hovered between them, anxious and yet resolute. "I know this is overwhelming," she said softly. "We can take it slow." Emma shook her head, tears brimming. "I've spent 32 years in darkness. I'm scared to go back to a life I never had." Her voice cracked. "Where do I even start?" Ethan reached out, draping an arm around his sister's shoulder. "We start with each other." He turned to Diane. "Mom, I remember bits and pieces, that boathouse, the lantern's light, but I don't know who I am. I feel like I'm a ghost stepping into a story someone else wrote." Diane swallowed, stepping closer. She slid down to sit on the floor at their feet. "You are Ethan Archer, firstborn son of mine. You love to chase squirrels in the yard. You call me Mama Archer with your sweet lisp." She brushed a strand of hair behind Emma's ear. "You are Emma Archer, my baby girl who was 6 when you were taken. You loved singing old lullabies. You call me Mama every night before bed." Emma's tears fell silently. I remember bits of humming," she whispered. "A lullaby I used to sing to a teddy bear. But then it was gone." Diane's hand trembled as she reached into her pocket, retrieving a small cassette tape. She placed it on the coffee table. "This was recorded by your Aunt Laura back in '87. It's your lullaby." Emma pressed her palm to her chest. I can't believe it." Ethan leaned forward, sliding the tape into a portable cassette player. Static crackled to life, then a soft female voice cooed. "Hush now, my darlings, the moon's on the rise. Close your sweet eyes and dream waltzing skies." The siblings closed their eyes as the lullaby's gentle chords filled the room. In that moment, the years melted and something fragile, tentative, sparked between them. Winter had descended on Pinewood Valley. Frost laced the window panes, and a soft blanket of snow muffled the town's usual hum. Inside the Archer house, laughter echoed as Diane and Ethan helped Emma wrap gifts by a roaring fire. The red jacket hung in a shadow box on the mantel, framed beneath a plaque reading, "Ethan and Emma Archer, found September 2019. Its presence remained a bittersweet reminder of time lost. Ethan's voice cracked as he placed a small box on the hearth. "I wish you could understand how grateful I am, Mom." Diane smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. "We will have all the time in the world to catch up." Emma, now clad in a thick gray sweater knitted by her mother, snapped her fingers. "Speaking of catching up, I have my first college class tomorrow, English literature." She grasped the stack of books on the coffee table. "I'd like to finish high school first, get a diploma." Ethan chuckled softly. "I'll help you study." Last I heard, the Pinewood High principal still has photos of the class of '87 on his office wall. Diane placed a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. "I'll sign you up for classes today. We'll figure out the rest." Across the room, through a frosted window, a battered pickup truck paused at Maple Street. Detective Ronald Hicks stepped out, briefcase in hand, pausing to take in the house's warm glow. He had been instrumental in reopening the case and often visited the Archers to offer support. Inside, Diane poured hot cocoa as Ethan and Emma surveyed their new reality. The flickering flames danced across their faces, faces that had spent decades in obscurity, now illuminated by second chances. Diane glanced at the red jacket shadow box and whispered, "We have them back." "But we—" Her words trailed into the crackle of the fire as she studied her children's confident yet cautious expressions. Yes, they were home, yet scars ran deep, unhealed gaps of lost years. Still, with each school lesson, each heartfelt conversation, they would rebuild, stitch by stitch, the tapestry of their lives torn by Colton's delusion. As the snow fell outside, blanketing Pinewood Valley in white, Diane Archer closed her eyes. She could almost feel the weight of the red jacket in her hands once more, the whisper of Ethan's footsteps running home. She felt the lullaby in her bones, the memory of two small hearts beating against her own. And in that moment, amid the crackling fire and the soft hum of winter, she breathed deeply, knowing that though they carried scars they could never forget, the glimmer of hope shining in her children's eyes would guide them forward. They had been lost for 32 years, but in each other's arms, they were found at last. The journey ahead would be long, bittersweet, and fraught with challenges, yet the bond of family, once severed, would never break again. A year passed, and Pinewood Valley's winter thawed into a verdant spring. On Maple Street, neighbors marveled at the renovated Archer home, fresh paint, flowering lilacs along the walkway, and a newly constructed porch swing. Diane, now a volunteer at the Town Support Center for Missing Persons Families, balanced her days between advocacy and motherhood. Emma, 23, enrolled in Pinewood Community College, majoring in English literature with dreams of writing her own memoir. Ethan, 28, attended high school as a special student, bridging a gap between adolescence and adulthood. He found solace in woodworking, carving miniature boats that he sold at the local crafts market. One afternoon, as afternoon light filtered through the living room windows, the three sat in a circle, Diane reading aloud from a dog-eared family album, Emma flipping through yearbooks she never got to see, Ethan tracing his small hand against the sleeve of the red jacket in its shadow box. Their bond, fragile and new, pulsed with silent gratitude for time reclaimed. On the porch swing, Detective Hicks joined them, sipping lemonade. "I've been meaning to check on you," he told Diane. "We've started a cold case unit at Pinewood PD. Your case inspired the community. I want to ensure no other family suffers this fate." He smiled, eyes misting. "You gave hope to so many." Diane's lips quivered with a tender smile. She looked at Ethan and Emma, seated side by side. "We remember what we lost," she whispered, "but we also remember what we have, each other." Emma leaned against her brother, resting her head on his shoulder. "Sometimes I wonder if I was meant to grow up here at all," she mused. "But now that I'm here, I realize this is where I belong." Ethan nodded, fingers stroking Emma's hair. "It feels strange being here as an adult. But being with you both, this is where I'm supposed to be." Diane pressed a hand to her chest, where her heart still throbbed with scars and gratitude. Across the yard, the lilacs swayed, their blossoms fragrant in the afternoon breeze. She glanced to the street corner, where a small metal bench bore a plaque, "In memory of Ethan and Emma Archer, may no child be lost." The world beyond Pinewood Valley beckoned: college essays, woodworking orders, advocacy meetings. Yet the simple comfort of an ordinary afternoon, family clinking ice cubes in glasses, the hum of bees in flowered bushes, felt sacred. The Red Jackets' memory no longer haunted them. It had become a symbol of enduring love and perseverance. As dusk settled, Diane invited her children inside for dinner. The Red Jackets' shadow box glowed against the living room wall, a silent testament to a mother's unyielding hope. Diane lingered a moment before closing her eyes, envisioning Ethan's small hand waving goodbye as he trudged toward home in that cool October air. She reached out to touch the glass frame, then turned away, stepping into the kitchen where laughter and the scent of tomato soup awaited. Their story had come full circle from that ill-fated autumn evening in 1987, through decades of sleepless nights, to the moment they reunited in a dusty boathouse under a dim lantern's glow. They would carry their scars, memories of stolen years, but they also carried a promise. That family, once found, would never be lost again. And as Pinewood Valley's clock chimed 6, Diane Archer set the table, calling out softly, "Ethan, Emma, dinner's ready." Two figures entered, their faces lit by the warm glow of home. Shoulder to shoulder, they walked into the kitchen, siblings, children, survivors, leaving the Red Jacket shadow box to stand vigil over a family forged anew, scars and all, in the heart of a small town that refused to forget.